The morning Marcus Hale pulled into the Pinecrest Elementary School parking lot, the laughter started before he even turned off the engine. The old Jeep Cherokee, its hood scorched black from a garage fire 6 months ago, its passenger door held shut with a bungee cord, its exhaust pipe rattling like a tin can full of gravel, coughed twice and shuddered to a stop right beside a row of gleaming SUVs and luxury crossovers. And the parents standing near the entrance, coffee cups in hand and sunglasses perched on their noses, didn't bother hiding their amusement. Some whispered behind cupped hands. Others simply stared with that particular brand of cruelty that wears the mask of polite society, wide eyes, slow smiles, a tilt of the head that said everything words didn't need to. Marcus didn't look at them. He just reached over to the back seat and gently unbuckled his 7-year-old daughter, Rosie, straightening her backpack straps and pressing a kiss to her forehead. Then he walked her to the door with his head high, even though his work boots were splitting at the sole and his jacket had a burned patch along the left sleeve, a souvenir from the same fire that had taken nearly everything else. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet dignity of people who keep going even when the world laughs at them, please like this video, drop a comment, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Wisdom Story House. This community was built for moments exactly like this one. What those parents in the parking lot didn't know, what they couldn't have known, because they had never bothered to ask, was that Marcus Hale had once commanded a reconnaissance unit in a country most of them couldn't find on a map. He had served 14 years in the United States Army, had earned commendations that sat in a box under his bed, had carried wounded soldiers through terrain so punishing it would have broken most men in half. He had come home whole in body but quietly fractured in ways that didn't show on the outside, and he had spent the years since trying to be the kind of father his daughter deserved, steady, present, unwilling to surrender. The fire had started on a Tuesday night in February. A faulty space heater in the garage, a pile of cardboard boxes too close to the wall, and by the time the smoke alarm woke him, Marcus had only seconds to grab Rosie from her bed and carry her out into the frozen front yard in her pajamas. The house was saved. The garage was not. And the Jeep, which had been parked inside, took the worst of it, scorched, warped, barely functional, but still running. It was always still running. Marcus couldn't afford to replace it. He was working 2 jobs, one as a maintenance technician at a warehouse on the east side of town, another 3 nights a week at a hardware store, and every dollar he earned went to Rosie's school supplies, Rosie's winter coat, Rosie's doctor appointments. There was nothing left for a new vehicle. There was barely enough for everything else. So he drove the burned Jeep. He drove it to work, to the grocery store, to Rosie's school every single morning, and he held his chin level every time someone looked at it sideways. He had learned long ago that shame was a luxury he couldn't afford. Dignity, however, cost nothing. The cruelty in the parking lot had been building for weeks. A group of fathers, most of them in finance or real estate, all of them driving vehicles that cost more than Marcus made in a year, had taken to making comments just loud enough to be heard. About the Jeep. About the smell of burned plastic that still clung faintly to it on warm days. About how the school's image was being brought down. One of them, a broad-shouldered man named Trevor Aldous who drove a pearl-white Range Rover, had gone so far as to suggest to the school's parent coordinator that the Jeep was a safety hazard and perhaps shouldn't be allowed in the drop-off lane. The coordinator, to her credit, had dismissed the complaint immediately. But word got back to Marcus, as word always does in small communities, and he had sat alone in his kitchen that night after Rosie went to sleep and pressed his hands flat on the table and breathed slowly until the feeling passed. Rosie, for her part, never seemed to notice. Or perhaps she noticed and chose, with the instinctive wisdom of a child raised by a patient man, not to say anything. She loved that Jeep. She called it the Dragon car because of the burn marks on the hood, and she had once told her teacher that her daddy's car was the most special one in the whole parking lot because it had survived a fire just like in her favorite storybook. Her teacher had smiled. Marcus, when he heard this later, had to step outside the classroom door for a moment before he could trust his face again. The morning everything changed was an ordinary Thursday in late October, cool and bright with the kind of pale golden light that makes everything look significant. Marcus pulled the dragon car into the drop-off lane, and the usual cluster of parents near the entrance turned to look with their usual expressions. Trevor Aldous said something to the man beside him and both of them laughed. Marcus unstrapped Rosie, handed her lunchbox, and watched her run toward the door, her ponytail bouncing, her sneakers flashing pink lights with every step. He was turning back toward the Jeep when he heard it, a sound so deeply embedded in his memory that it stopped him completely still before his conscious mind even processed what it was. Engines. Military vehicles. The low, diesel rumble of a convoy. 3 army trucks turned slowly into the school parking lot, followed by 2 black sedans with government plates. Behind them, a 4th truck rolled in and parked along the curb. Parents stepped back. Children pressed their faces to the school's front windows. The parking lot, which had been buzzing with the usual morning noise, went absolutely quiet. 12 soldiers in full dress uniform stepped out of the vehicles and formed a precise, silent line near the entrance. Then the rear door of the lead sedan opened, and a man stepped out who carried authority the way mountains carry weight, not loudly, not aggressively, but simply as a fact of his existence. He was tall and silver-haired, his chest decorated with ribbons that represented years and sacrifice most people in that parking lot could never comprehend. 4 stars gleamed on his shoulders. General Raymond Colt, former commanding officer of the 3rd Infantry Division, walked across that parking lot with the measured, unhurried pace of a man who has never needed to prove himself to anyone. He walked directly to Marcus Hale. The 2 men looked at each other for a moment, and then the general extended his hand and Marcus took it, and the general pulled him into a brief, firm embrace, the kind shared between men who have seen things together that change you permanently. Because Raymond Colt had been Marcus's commanding officer, 11 years ago, in a desert valley where an ambush had gone wrong and a young sergeant had carried 2 injured soldiers 2 kilometers through open terrain under fire to reach the extraction point. One of those soldiers had been Colt's own nephew. Marcus had never spoken of it publicly. He had never asked for anything in return. General Colt had spent years trying to locate Marcus after his discharge. He had finally found him 3 weeks ago, through a veterans network, and had learned what Marcus's life looked like now, the 2 jobs, the burned Jeep, the little girl he was raising alone after his wife passed from illness 4 years prior. And Raymond Colt, who commanded thousands and answered to the highest offices in the country, had made one simple decision. He was going to show up. What happened next lasted only about 20 minutes, but those 20 minutes would be talked about in Pinecrest for years. The general spoke to Marcus quietly but didn't attempt to hide the conversation from those watching. He told Marcus, clearly and without ceremony, that a Veterans Housing Assistance Fund had been arranged for him, that a vehicle, a fully restored Jeep Wrangler, donated by a veteran-owned dealership whose owner had also served, was waiting at an address across town, and that a position had been created for Marcus at the Regional Veterans Outreach Center at a salary that would let him stop working nights. Then General Colt turned and faced the crowd of parents, who had not moved, and he said simply that they were in the presence of a man who had earned more than any of them would likely ever understand, and he hoped they would treat him accordingly. Trevor Aldous didn't say a word. Nobody did. Marcus stood in the morning light with his eyes bright and his jaw steady and let the moment settle around him like something earned over a very long time. Before we reach the final words of this story, drop a comment below and tell us, what did this story make you feel? Write just one word if that's all you have. Your words matter here. When Rosie came out of school that afternoon and saw the soldiers still waiting with her father, she didn't ask questions the way adults do. She just took Marcus's hand and leaned against his arm, and Marcus looked down at her, and something in him that had been braced for a long, long time finally let go. The dragon car sat in the parking lot one last time, burned and battered and still upright. It had gotten them this far. That was enough. If this story moved something in you, if it reminded you that dignity survives and kindness finds its way home, please like this video, share it with someone who needs it today, and subscribe to Wisdom Story House. Every share is a small act of the same kindness this story is about. Thank you for being here.